What's going on, everybody? It's Brandon. Welcome back to Marotta Media. As usual, I am a little bit late in giving my thoughts on the movie that I will be reviewing today, but the movie that I will be discussing today was one of my most anticipated movies of 2022. Don't Worry, Darling. In Don't Worry, Darling, we follow two characters named Alice and Jack, played by Florence Pugh and Harry Styles. And the two of them live in this experimental community called Victory in the middle of the California desert. But Alice soon discovers that this utopian society might not be what it seems when she believes that the company that Jack works for is harboring some very sinister secrets. As I mentioned, this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. It was directed by Olivia Wilde, and I will be honest, I did not see her first movie, Booksmart, but I heard a lot of good things about it. But every time I saw the preview for this movie, I just got more and more hyped for it. But a lot of the hype was taken away because this movie had a lot of drama behind the scenes. Now, I'm not going to get into every single detail of the drama that happened in the movie, but believe me, a lot happened. With Shia LaBeouf, the fact that Olivia Wilde and Florence Pugh didn't really seem to like each other, and the fact that Harry Styles may or may not have spit on Chris Pine at the Venice Film Festival, it really seemed like the drama was far outweighing the movie and its possible success. And as a result, I think that's what happened here, because Don't Worry, Darling is a much worse movie than I could have ever imagined. Let me get the good things out of the way first, because believe me, there is not a lot of them. Personally, I think the acting by the entire cast was very well done, especially by Florence Pugh, which isn't really much of a surprise because she's fantastic in everything that she's been in, which is amazing when you consider the fact that she was given complete and utter shit in this script to work with, but she made the absolute best of it. Now, the big question is Harry Styles as bad as people believed him to be? Honestly, no, he is not. Before the movie's release, the studio released a short clip from the movie of Harry Styles talking to Florence Pugh, and in this scene it appears that he speaks in 11 different accents in the span of like 10 seconds.
Not everyone gets this opportunity. And if you keep talking like this, you're gonna put it all at risk.
You're worried about a demotion? That's what you're worried about?
Our life. Alice, our life together. This. We could lose this.
And it was not a good performance in that moment, but that one scene is not reminiscent of his entire performance throughout the whole movie. I mean, he's not a seasoned actor, and you can tell, but I think he held his own here. He really wasn't that bad. But the thing I think I love most is definitely the production design. The architecture of the houses I thought looked really cool, and the cars that all of the characters drove looked awesome. All of it really sold that 1950s aesthetic that the movie was going for. And considering the conflict in the movie along with the setting, it reminded me a lot of a mix of The Truman Show with Fallout. I don't know why Fallout, probably because of the old school aesthetic and the music that they use, and the fact that they're in the desert, and I guess I just kept expecting a huge bomb to just come down and destroy the entire community, but spoiler alert, that never happens. But the aesthetic they were going for was really, really cool in theory, but unfortunately, the rest of this movie is not very good. The pacing was so quick, especially at the beginning. Almost immediately we are introduced to these characters, but none of them have a formal introduction and we don't really get to know them. They're at like a house party and they're just dancing and getting drunk with one another. And I feel as a result of this, the characters and the world building are completely underdeveloped. You hardly know anything about any of the characters, but what was most disappointing to me was that we hardly knew anything about Victory, the community that they live in. All we know about it is that it was the idea of Frank, played by Chris Pine, and he brought his idea to life. But that's pretty much the extent of it. We never really know why the community was built in the first place or what his motivations were. And Chris Pine is fantastic in this movie. I think he's actually a really good villain, but it's too bad he was completely underdeveloped and had hardly any screen time. And while I do think the acting by all is really good, it felt like there were a lot of moments where the actors were held back by atrocious writing and directing. There were quite a few scenes that I can remember where a character was having a really intense moment, and I felt that they could have gotten a lot more out of the performance. but it felt like Olivia Wilde was telling them to hold back and not go all out. And I think that speaks to her inexperience as a director, especially for a movie like this. There's also an overabundance of this weird imagery that they use throughout. You could see a lot of these images in the trailers, specifically these women that are dressed in bathing suits and they have like makeup on and it's all in black and white. You never find out what any of this means because none of it is explained. It feels like all of these images are there just for the sake of being weird and to disturb you. And they didn't disturb me in the slightest. In fact, they just distracted me more than anything. But that's just a testament to my biggest issue with Don't Worry Darling. This movie contains absolutely no closure whatsoever, because almost none of the events that occur in this film are explained. Like I said before, we never find out what Victory is, why it was built, or why Chris Pine wanted to build it. And there's another scene where Florence Pugh is on this trolley and she's leaving Victory because she says she needs some fresh air. And she sees a plane crashing and just falling out of the sky. And she goes to investigate, but she has to walk there because the dude on the trolley refuses to help her. And she comes across this building that we are soon given more answers about, but other than that, this plane that she sees is never mentioned again. But given the nature of this movie's twist, it came across like the movie felt like it didn't need to explain anything because the twist would just retcon everything that happened. It just came across so lazy, like they came up with all of these ideas, but they didn't know how to explain them. So they came up with the most ridiculous and lamest twist possible in an attempt to do away with all these ideas that they didn't know what to do with and hope that people wouldn't notice. But the twist in this movie, dude, let me tell you, it's so ridiculously stupid. The twist in Don't Worry Darling shocked me in the sense that it was so dumb that I thought this movie would have come up with something a lot more clever than what it did. And without getting into spoilers, let me just say, if you've seen Serenity from 2019, then you know what the twist in Don't Worry Darling is. That is all I will say, because they are very, very similar. But an even bigger issue with that is that I was not really invested in anything that was happening that led us to the big reveal. The setup was so uninteresting because it just left you with more questions than answers. Don't Worry Darling takes itself way too seriously. It certainly felt like this movie thought it was saying something so important and profound, but it did it in the lamest way possible that you just completely lose interest. This movie definitely thought it was a lot smarter than it actually was, because in reality, it's really dumb. It's really, really dumb. You really know you have a problem when the drama surrounding the production of your movie is 10 times more interesting than the actual movie itself. But if Don't Worry Darling did not have great acting, awesome production values, and an interesting idea, then this would have been one of the biggest disappointments, I think, in film history. But because it has all of those positive qualities, it did bump my rating up a little bit, but not by much. Overall, I would give Don't Worry Darling a 3 out of 10. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching my review of Don't Worry Darling. If you guys saw this movie, let me know what you thought about it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you excited for it like I was and then ultimately disappointed? If you guys like this review, be sure to hit that thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. If you want to see my previous reviews, I will link those right over here. Oh, and I was on a podcast recently. It's called the Deadhead Podcast. Thank you so much to my buddy Dylan for having me on. We had a great conversation. If you want to check that out, I will link that in the description. Other than that, I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.